Hey, Theater Philadelphia fam. It is great to be back with y'all for another podcast episode in celebration of our seventh annual Philly Theater Week. I am here with the Hummingbirds themselves. Shout out to Taylor and Wyatt who are joining us. I'm gonna let them introduce themselves and talk about, what brought them to the Hummingbirds as well as to this grand finale we're gonna see right at the end of Theater Week on April 14th. So Taylor and Wyatt, welcome. Please introduce yourself. Let us know how you're showing up here today.
Great, I can go first. I'm Taylor Alexander. I use they, she pronouns. I have been a theater artist my whole life. I do a lot of the administrative aspects of things for the Bards, but I also do a lot of the hosting for our fundraisers, and I do drag on the side as well. So you can find me as Patty Lou Stoned when you're looking for me publicly.
I'm Wyatt Flynn. I use all the pronouns, they, them of center, but I take them all. And me and Taylor and I started the Hummingbirds several years ago, back in what, 2014, 2015,
2016,
somewhere
I
around then,
think.
2016.
Yeah, but we were friends
And
first.
yeah, and yeah, I do a lot of the sort of like bigger picture planning stuff for the Bards. I mean, we do that very like collaboratively. But I I'm also like kind of like a music person, and I do a lot of writing and things like that for the Bards. And yeah, um, that's us.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you talked about the founding of like back in 2016, the founding of Hummingbirds. Can you talk more about, y'all drive to start this, collective and company of this theater troupe, really, of artists?
Yeah. So we actually met back in college at Temple University,
To
probably back
you. I'm sorry.
to you, yeah. Temple made. Um, so we started doing sketch comedy and improv together. We were on an improv troupe called Misogyny. Um, and then
Period.
Don't look that up.
yeah,
Don't look it up.
Misogyny, like Miss. It was before we all knew we were trans. So that's how we got started. And then we ended up working at a cafe together after college. And Wyatt had tons of ideas, and I was like, we should do them. So Wyatt can talk a little bit more about our first production and how that got started and what a interesting collaborative process that was.
Yeah. So yeah, I had this idea for a show that I got when I was at Temple taking like a gen ed earth sciences class, and I was learning about like Pangea and how, the idea that we all used to be one giant continent. And we were all neighbors. And I was like kind of wanted to take that idea and run with it. And so the we ended up making like a piece that was about what if we all Pangea kept splitting further and further apart, and we all end up on our own individual islands. And this was in 2016, so like way pre-COVID. We sometimes like to joke that we like called it. But so yeah, it was like we started writing this show while we were working at this cafe. I'm like scrawling lyrics on like receipt paper, like
Yes.
and Taylor was like, let's actually do this thing. Let's like really make this show. And so yeah, we got together a group of people who we wanted to work with, and we started devising and created this piece together. And that was like the beginning of the Hummingbirds.
Yeah, and on top of all the collaboration we did in Philadelphia, we had our director was based out of Las Vegas. So she was zooming in to direct us on this project. I was the assistant stage manager slash I helped with the lights and like some choreography, and pretty much like any job that needed to get done, I was like, hey, I can help with that.
Period.
This all sort of like came out of a place of just a feeling like we had a lot of ideas for theater and wanting to be able to have control over our artistic expression and being able to make like really queer and experimental theater. And yeah, to really just have the freedom and to be able to give freedom to other performers and artistic theater creators, so that they could express their full artists.
Exactly.
I love that. I love that. I love the ahead of your time, really, because when I think about 2016, I was at Temple. And I can remember the notion of like providing spaces for queerness, for any affinity group to have and to boldly, tell the stories without being filtered out or without having to worry about necessarily people's opinions on what we're doing was a very much ahead of your time, because that was, even now we're still fighting for those spaces to be like funded properly, to be supported, to be brought into attention. And there's a lot of, I know a lot of my generation, as well as the generation of Temple now, who looks at, groups like Hummingbirds or Theater Conjure, or just like different people, groups that have come together to say, no, we're going to tell our stories. You don't have to cast us. We got this. Don't worry about it. We still going to make some theater, period, and blank. And I love that. Can you talk more about some of the adversity that was faced in that starting times? Like any, things that you had to navigate, as far as being like, no, we're telling this story. Get yourself together. And we really don't care what you want, what you got to say about it.
I could say that some of the biggest struggles that we have is with funding. We have a very small Patreon subscription. So we have a couple of people who support us monthly, but for the most part, we get all of our funding from our ticket sales. And we work in small spaces, we work with small groups of people, so we have small budgets. And that limits who is going to work with us, and it limits just what exactly we can do, because we've been trying for years to do more accessible theater, and we do offer all of our productions on digital streaming for that reason, with captions as well. But we would love to at some point rent out a theater that actually is accessible, someplace like Theater Exile or Comedy Sports or even 10 Live Arts. That would be like an amazing feat for us to be able to have a fully accessible theater space for us to work in, because we do want to include people who have different abilities and different levels of like being able to move in the space,
Yeah. I feel like one of the biggest challenges we have is like with the budget that we have access to is making our productions both accessible to audiences of like all economic backgrounds, and also making our productions accessible to theater artists for being able to work with us, being able to give them the support financially that they very much need and deserve, in order to participate and work on our shows. And I think over the past couple of years, we've shifted a little bit more towards that direction and putting a bit more emphasis on supporting the artists that we're working with, but while also still making accessible and like no one turned away for lack of funds productions that anyone can come and see.
Yeah.
And that can be hard in general, because there's that notion of your passion versus like what's going to get my bills paid this month, and those kind of things that a lot of artists struggle with. And the struggle is also, I always was like, it's a beautiful struggle, because at one point you're like, it feels great when you can use the budget you got and y'all pull it together and it's beautiful production. You're like, yes. And then on the other hand, you're like, but I would love to do this instead every day, with proper funding, with support, because I know that there's a high demand for it, right? That we would love to keep up with. And I think that's something that a lot of smaller theater companies are looking at. Like, we deserve to be funded and to have access to these grants and things. I know that's something that I brought up in one of my art council meetings for the transition team for the mayor. I was like, we need to talk about unrestricted funds and this gatekeeping that we have around funding artists and smaller collectives, because that gatekeeping, you're looking for these options, look for these audiences, the queer audiences, you're looking for all the inner city community audiences that y'all want to come to theater, but y'all not making strides to fund those and to make sure that there's space and room. And space is always the biggest thing and the biggest contributor to how we bring productions to life, right? And so I think that's sort of another question about this notion of, what does it mean for shared space, for space that are like co-working spaces in theater? I rarely see, not say very successful, but very affordable and accessible solutions to space for small theater collectives. That does not mean you bouncing from place to place, but means a shared collaborative, space, are there any ideas and visions that y'all have about collaborations in the future y'all like to make or want to do in support of space and funding?
Yeah, there's a lot of options out there. We do a lot of our shows in bars because we don't have to pay for bar space. And that's another accessibility issue there, is like having to work at a bar is like not the safest space for all of our audience members. It's not the most accessible because a lot of our spaces are up a flight of steps. And we just haven't been able to make those connections with other theater troupes or theater collectives to share space with them. I know that there are some that like have forms like, fill us out this form and we'll consider your production for our space. And we do the forms, we fill things out, do our pitch the best we can, but it's not always enough because there's so many other people trying to make theater in Philadelphia independently. And I think that's a beautiful thing that there's so much competition, but it's also difficult for small companies like ours to find our footing and to find the spaces that are so needed for us.
I think one of my favorite spaces that we've worked with recently is Pentridge Station.
Oh yeah.
They're
we had a really good experience there.
Yeah. And they're a really great, I mean, they're like a pop-up when the weather is nice, kind of thing. And I just wish they could be all year round because they're really an awesome group.
They were great because they collaborated with us and they like split some of the profits with us. So that was amazing. They have their own like audience, so we put on the show, and the show is like a 5-hour production, and it was like there were tons of people who just walked in not knowing what we were doing. We were doing a fairy themed cabaret, and people were like, oh, that sounds cool, I'll give some money to that.
Yeah.
They also have great food and pickles. Just putting on all that. Like really, I'm in it for the pickles. Like absolutely.
Yeah. So they have like local food vendors come and like use their space. So they collaborate with food vendors as well. And on top of that, they have mocktails as well as alcoholic drinks, which I love. I don't drink anymore, so I love any place that has a mocktail. They also have hookah, which is like a fun, different thing that I
did not know that.
See any other. Yeah, I did a little bit of hookah after the show because it was like 10 o'clock at night and I was out of steam. I was like, let's try this hookah. I'm not a big hookah person, but I was like, let's give this a try.
It's also outdoors, which is nice for COVID stuff, like COVID safety.
Exactly.
Feeling better about that.
Yeah, we tried to make all of our events masks required for our audience, especially when we're in small spaces like the Peanut Mug.
that's a conversation that's constantly happening here in Philadelphia as well. When we're like doing our events, we're mask recommended. Please bring your mask. Please bring, we got a lot of flack for the Barrymore. It's like, why we gotta test before we come? Because,
Because we don't want everybody to get sick.
I said, stop playing with us. But also, you're talking about another level of accessibility, another level of risk that you're trying to make. That's really community work, right? That's really like,
exactly.
We care about the community, and we're saying, I'm always of the mask recommended because I know there's some people you ain't never gonna convince these mofos to get themselves together, but you can be like, listen, I'm asking you kindly, just put it on. Put it on for me while we're in the small space. And if you're not putting it on, please make sure that you're properly testing and make sure that you also are making sure that you're taking the recommendations for your health wise and for people around you. But you got folks walking in, you sick. Why the hell are you in this space? You know you've been coughing for the last 2 weeks. Why are you around me? And I think it also comes with what I love also is this notion of, in talking to a lot of different small collectives, it's really a lot of community work that goes into it. I was talking to Beacon Theater the other day, and they were talking also about this notion of space, right? And how to find space, but also because you care about the community that you're working with and letting them to be able to access your shows, but also to feel welcomed in those spaces, because it's hard. I think queerness is as a queer body, is non-binary, like femme body. I'm like, sometimes queerness is popularized and used, and then sometimes it's actually a space for queerness to be out there and living fully breathing and humanized and three-dimensional and four-dimensional. um and that's hard to communicate sometimes to bigger theaters, who sometimes it can get influenced by, oh, we're doing a queer show, let's do it. And you're like, no, but is it really queer? Is it popularized queer, or is it, I'm supporting the queer community in every intersection through this work? What are some things that you hope for the queer community to have more of in Philadelphia theater?
I think just more theater and more weird stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like more experimentation. A lot of the stuff that we've done has been very experimental and like collaborative. Our very first theater week was this very experimental slideshow theatrical production that we did at Tattooed Mom. It was a presentation done by Eric Jaffe called Not the Illuminati. Um, and so Eric was talking all about like different aspects of the Illuminati and different things in that respect. And then we had a slideshow playing in the background, and it also incorporated like some of their drag parodies, and then Wyatt sang an original song, and we had like original stuff. We had a DJ. So I want to see more weird experimental theater. And I also love seeing like one person shows too. That's always like really fun to see.
A word of warning though, if you do decide to do some weird theater, especially Illuminati themed, just be prepared for the kinds of Facebook messages that are like, hey, do you want to be an Illuminati master? Like, and we're like, no, actually, thank you. No, we're good.
But, we're already Illuminati masters.
Thank you so much. Exactly.
You're like, how'd you know?
But yeah, I think in terms of like what kinds of queer theater we're trying to like see and make, like a lot of Hummingbird shows are, at first like kind of unintentionally pretty much exclusively trans, like all of our cast, like the whole crew, everybody, it kind of just turned out that way. And then as we've been going, it's become more and more intentional, where that's like who our community is. And I feel like I don't get to see that much theater where I'm watching and everybody on that stage is queer or trans.
Mm-hmm.
So it feels pretty special that that's something that our company pretty
Yeah.
consistently does. And yeah, and I would love to just see like more of that. You know, I want to see more companies and individuals and just groups of queer people getting together and making queer theater.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the grand finale is majority trans and non-binary. I think we have exactly one cis person, but she's also queer.
You know,
So
for diversity, you know.
You gotta include them, I mean, no, but I'm excited for the grand finale. Can you talk more about like the concept of the grand finale, and kind of what audiences can expect from attending?
yeah, so we were pitching ideas for Theater Week because we do Theater Week every year. We knew we wanted it to be a fundraiser for our season, so we knew it would probably be a cabaret of some sorts. And I don't remember who came up with the idea specifically, but we just had this idea of like, oh, the end of Theater Week is a really good date for us. Um, what could we do to celebrate Theater
Mm-hmm.
Week being over? Because we love Theater Week. We've done it every year. Um, and we just like came up with this idea of like this elegant grand finale, like kind of moment where we'll sing songs that are either finale numbers from a show. I also say that we're doing 11 o'clock numbers, so like the biggest number in the end of the show. That's like the big solo, usually. And then we also have final songs from original or from albums. And then Wyatt's also considering doing an original song from one of our shows. So the finale from one of our shows.
Yes, I'm always here for that. I'm like, listen, fundraiser, little fun, little kick off. Like, listen, wrap it
Yeah.
up. You
And
know.
we're gonna do karaoke after the show, so it's gonna be very interactive. People who want to come and sing with us, they can sing with us. And it's also at the Painted Mug, which is an all ages venue. So I've been promoting this show as like a PG-13 event, so people can bring their teenagers if they'd like.
Oh Lord, the range from teenagers. Listen, no, I must definitely send some of my teenagers your way because they're really always excited about shows they can
Yeah,
actually go and see by themselves, or be like, oh, we're gonna go head down, to the Phantom
exactly.
Mug and watch, the grand finale. And I'm like, okay, y'all, we have a group of teenagers in our youth cohort with Theater
Oh,
Philadelphia, and
nice.
they're always like, Mr. Red, give me a ticket to this show. What you mean? Give me a ticket. Hook me up. And I'm like, okay, can you chill out? Let me make sure you can go to this show. And they're like, okay, cool. So I'll definitely send them a lot of them your way. And you'll know
Nice.
they're me because they'll be standing around like, so can we talk to y'all? But that's exciting. We're also excited to have y'all at performing at the kickoff celebration, Raise Your Voice event. It's going to be great. I'm excited. I was like, okay, let's
Yeah.
do it. But yeah, can you?
Yes.
And I think my last question really is surrounding. I asked everyone in the podcast this notion. What do you hope or want for the future of Philly theater? What is your biggest hope for it? When I say biggest, it seems strange to be some small to us, but there really are the biggest things that we could possibly have and see in evolution of Philly theater.
Um, I can talk a little bit about this. Me and Wyatt recently attended a very informative meeting with the Gender Funk group on
Mm-hmm.
Instagram. And they, if you're not familiar with Gender Funk, they support trans and non-binary performers in Philadelphia on Instagram, and they do a lot of promotion for both us and for lots of other people. It's really great community of people. And we had
Mm-hmm.
this meeting where people were talking about what they would like to see from the Philly theater community. And I thought that was such a informative and really helpful meeting because like things that I wouldn't have thought of, like things like why I was talking about changing keys for songs and stuff, and like
Mm.
less like gendering of audition sides and less gendering in the audition room. And I think that that's stuff that would be so helpful for other theater makers in Philadelphia to consider. And it's something that's kind of at the core of our being because we are a trans and queer theater collective. Um, so I think stuff like that would be so helpful. Wyatt, I don't know
Yeah.
if you have stuff you want to add to that.
Um, my brain, like, I feel like my brain just went blank.
No worries,
But
no worries.
yeah, no, I agree. I feel like yeah, we're hoping for um just more accessible theater, more queer theater, and like support for individual queer performing artists. You know, sometimes it feels like you have to already have a lot of money in order to make art at all.
Mm.
Um, and I would love for that to no longer feel true. And that's kind of like, fighting capitalism, which kind of feels like an uphill against the stream battle sometimes. But it's a battle that our company is continuing to commit
Mhm.
fighting. And yeah, I guess just, more folks on board, like, some higher up support would be sickening. Yeah.
Yeah. And thank y'all for being so open to sharing your journey, but also um, the work that you're doing to climb that hill that is this battle against capitalism, and at the same time having to live in its system. And I think that's something that a lot of times uh, I never grow tired of the conversation that needs to be had. Um, I know some people do be like, "Not talking. What's the action?" It's like, no, part of the action is also the talking. It's also the willingness to have conversations and to bring up the things that we need, not things that we just want, but things that we need for the future of our communities, and for our communities to coexist with other communities, and to, in some ways, also merge with other communities and build stronger forces, right? To say this is what we all collectively can benefit from, right? When I say we all, I am specifically seeking to queer people, Black people, brown people, Asian people, indigenous people. That is who I'm talking to. Pacific Islanders. Okay, the list goes on. Um, but to say that we fight against white supremacy and we fight against this notion of capitalism that comes and thinks it's a streamline to our arts. And it's not. It's not. We are the backbone of it. So I thank you, Taylor and Wyatt. Thank y'all for being on here today and to talking more about, your journey, Hummingbard's journey, and what's still yet to come in the journey. And I appreciate being in community with y'all, and having Theater Philadelphia be able to hold this platform for y'all to speak more about these things, but also the work that you're doing and highlighting it. We're excited for the grand finale, y'all. April 14th. It's gonna be good. Y'all better go head on down, get it. If my teenagers are listening, we'll get y'all tickets. I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, those fools. They were like, listen, I hear you say, Mr. Brady, we going. Okay. We're going. We're going. But yes, I thank y'all for coming on here. Looking forward to Philly Theater Week and what it's going to be of all the celebration. I'm really excited. I'm really excited. So thank y'all again.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank
Thanks for
you.
having us.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to speak with you.
Thank you.